We have a big show tonight, and the words I'm about to report are truly unusual, even for an unusual year. Paul Manafort is in jail right now. Today, a judge sided with Bob Mueller to find that Manafort has been credibly accused of obstruction of justice, meaning he is too dangerous to be allowed to remain free, awaiting his much-anticipated trial. So, number one, the former campaign chief for the President of the United States is slated to be incarcerated until his trial begins. And number two, if Paul Manafort's convicted and sentenced to the maximum punishment that today would mark, well, that would mark the first day of a lifetime behind bars. There are alternatives as well. One is that Paul Manafort could ultimately be found not guilty and thus get out of the jail term that he effectively starts tonight. Another alternative is that he could ultimately cooperate, get a lighter sentence. And that brings us to another potential defendant in the Mueller probe. Sources close to Trump lawyer Michael Cohen now saying tonight, and saying this to reporters, meaning someone wants this to get out, that Cohen may cooperate and flip on Donald Trump. One reason why? Well, tonight there are new reports of the feds getting their hands on new evidence from Cohen, documents, and get this, over 700 pages of messages and materials that Cohen tried to keep secret by using, yes, encrypted messaging apps, as well as documents he tried to hide by shredding them, although 16 pages of those documents have been reportedly put back together after being pulled from a shredder. They've been reconstructed. Wow. Now, legal experts have noted how Cohen's potentially inept shredding could come back to haunt him. In fact, right here on the beat, Cohen's very opponent in the Stormy Daniels case, Michael Avenatti, noted that skimping on a cheap shredder, never a good idea.
I was going to ask Michael what kind of shredder he had. My favorite thing
crosscut shredder. You have to buy a crosscut shredder, not a strip shredder. You can't be cheap when it comes to your shredder.
They're actually not that expensive.
You can't be cheap when it comes to your shredder. Again, the news tonight, and this is not normal. This is not normal news nights that we say this, but the feds have pieced together the shredding that the president's lawyer tried to do, and they have that evidence now for a criminal case. Now today, Cohen's own lawyers are asking for 10 more days to review at least the encrypted messages part of this before the prosecutors have them for whatever they want to do with them. Now, futile attempts at encrypted messaging is actually what links Cohen and Manafort tonight. Manafort in jail right now because Bob Mueller alleges he did his witness tampering via encrypted messaging. And responding to Mueller's motion, the judge said that while there's no appetite for this to jail Manafort, his attempt to use his phone as a tampering and obstruction device was simply unacceptable. Now, as for whether she could limit his communications technology and then just leave him out on bail as he'd requested, the judge said today tersely, "This is not middle school. I can't take away his cell phone." Now, jail is obviously one of the worst places on earth to prepare for a complex criminal trial. But by confiscating Paul Manafort's phone and personal property, the court system is helping him in a way because it's removing one of the tools Mueller says Manafort used to commit new crimes. As a legal strategy, Mueller's operating on the premise that this will protect the probe, that it could put more pressure on Manafort, and also reflects Bob Mueller's confidence when you think about it, that he believes at least he must already have enough evidence on Manafort. Otherwise, if he caught him committing potential crimes through the phone, he could have just kept surveilling Manafort's phone to gather even more evidence. So as Paul Manafort, a 69-year-old man with all kinds of political experience and global travels, as he spends the first night of his life in jail tonight, and as Michael Cohen tells associates tonight that he is bracing for potential arrest and considering cooperating, Bob Mueller is clearly sending a message about obstruction and evidence to any other would-be criminal witnesses or any other would-be obstructors who think they can pull one over on the special counsel. And the message, to channel the romantics, is clear. I can hear the secrets that you keep when you're talking in your sleep. And to update that line for 2018, sleep on Bob Mueller at your own peril. With me now, former Trump campaign aide Sam Nunberg, who's one of the few people speaking publicly who has testified in Bob Mueller's grand jury room, two former federal prosecutors, Joyce Vance and Nelson Cunningham, who was also general counsel in the Clinton White House, and former Vermont governor and former DNC chair, Howard Dean. There is a lot to discuss, Joyce, what does it mean to you that tonight Paul Manafort sleeps in a cell?
To the extent that Mueller's sending a message, that message is that he will not tolerate people who lie to federal agents or otherwise interfere in prosecutions. We've seen the earlier prosecutions for lying to agents. Now we see this prosecution for obstruction, which happened incredibly quickly. And this will go to Mueller's core belief that the criminal justice system is about finding the truth in a courtroom, determining a defendant's guilt or innocence consistent with those principles, and that anyone who tries to interfere with that process should be dealt with as sternly as possible. And so as a result, Manafort finds himself in jail pending trial tonight.
Nelson, the big question in Washington is what happens now that people of this significance in the Trump campaign and in Donald Trump's world, personal, business, and otherwise, are facing this kind of heat. We talk a lot about inflection points. This is certainly an inflection point in the sense that we haven't seen anyone this high profile jailed. Paul Manafort's in jail. It's the kind of thing you can't say enough. And if you think about other people that filled his role, if one imagines a David Axelrod in the Obama era in jail, it sort of reminds you that we're not living in normal times. One of the things that is up for debate is whether Paul Manafort knows something or has something of interest to the special counsel probe. Here is how Donald Trump has talked about it.
What have you learned about Donald Trump since you started working for him that you didn't know before?
Well, I've known him a long time, and I've always known him to be flexible. I've always known him to be driven.
Paul Manafort has done an amazing job. He's here someplace. Where's Paul?
I've known Donald since the 1980s, and we talked about it, and he felt I could help him as I felt.
Paul's had great success with Reagan and with Bush and with Ford, and, great success. He doesn't have to do this, like I don't have to. He didn't need to do this, but he wanted to.
He wanted to. Do you see this as only bad news for Manafort or potentially for Trump as well?
Today could be one of the biggest days in the investigation so far, between the steps in Manafort going to jail and the Cohen document review being completed and these final documents being found. Paul Manafort, 69 years old. Today is the first day of the rest of his life, and he's looking at the rest of his life behind bars. The underlying counts on which he's already charged are layup counts. Any prosecutor could prove that case in a week. He's facing them in D.C., he's facing them in Virginia. He knows that he is going to face the rest of his life in jail. You add on top of that tampering with witnesses, and any judge is going to throw the book at him. He has one choice. He has two things that might get him out of jail. One of those is cooperating with Mueller and finding a way to help him complete his investigation. And the second is the Hail Mary pass of a pardon from the president.
Right, which is something that we can get into. Howard Dean, we can play a little Who Said It. Who do you think said today, didn't know Manafort was the head of the mob?
I don't know who said that. I mean, I know Trump said he claimed not to just to barely know Manafort.
Well, he might barely know him, but he knows enough to say that. I'll read you the entire context. What a tough sentence for Manafort, who represented Reagan, Dole, many top people. Didn't know Manafort was the head of the mob. And then he goes on to what about other stuff that I'm not going to read. What do you think about the relationship between these two men tonight, one in the White House, the other in the Slammer?
Look, Manafort knows everything that Trump is in trouble for. Manafort was his campaign manager. Manafort, in many ways, was the mastermind that set this up. Manafort knows politics inside out. Trump doesn't. Manafort knows exactly how much collaboration there was with the Russians, because Manafort knows the Russians inside out and has made tens of millions of dollars from the Russians, some of which he is being accused of laundering, and I think that's probably true. So this is pretty significant.
Sam, you are the only person on the panel who's been in Mueller's grand jury room.
And who's done tweets for Donald Trump.
And you've ghostwritten Donald Trump's tweets.
And tweeted and had him dictate tweets to me. So
he dictated tweets to you. Are you more proud of the ghostwriting or the dictating?
Ghostwriting.
The ghostwriting.
Like any, gets screamed at a lot.
Like any political author. Well, this is a significant night. You obviously cooperated. Mueller's view, now backed by a judge, is that Manafort not only did not cooperate, but committed a new crime. Based on your direct interaction with this Mueller team and these FBI investigators, what do you think happens next for Paul? Do you think they have more on him? Do you think they can win this case against Paul?
Well, I don't know if they could win. I think that the case is pretty much in terms of the money laundering, let's say, or whatever they're calling it. That's, to me, it would seem, I'm not a professional on this like Mr. Cunningham, but to me it seems pretty easy to prove. With that said, I only look at this, Ari, really from a political point of view, from the point of, is this going to hurt Donald Trump if the Democrats win in November? And it gets to the impeachment goes through the House and gets to the Senate.
You say the impeachment. I mean, we're not anywhere near impeachment right now.
I think Mueller's going to write a report, and the report's going to be used depending on who controls. If it's Speaker Pelosi and Jerry Nadler's running the House Judiciary, then Donald Trump will be impeached, and he'll be impeached even if they have a 2-seat majority.
Do you think it's possible, since you bring it up, do you think it's possible Mueller could write a report that says a lot of people did bad things, but he doesn't see an impeachable offense by the president?
No, because I don't think that I think that Mueller is on a vendetta personally. That's me. That's me. That's my opinion. I don't think the man walks on water.
Well, with him being a Republican FBI
that doesn't matter.
Director.
The whole Republican thing doesn't. You know that they always go back with that. And let me explain to you something. James Comey is technically a Republican. John McCain is technically a Republican. The Bushes are Republicans. Do you think they like Donald Trump?
When you say technically, do you mean literally?
I mean, he's a registered Republican.
I mean, they spent their public life as registered Republicans and won.
And then they decided not to vote. They all say they voted for John McCain. They all say they voted for Mitt Romney, but they stuck out and they didn't vote on that past election. And then, oh, by the way, James Comey's number 2, Andrew McCabe, who he's in a dispute with.
Well, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Because now you're just bringing up other stuff.
Sure, so let's stay on this
segment. Let's stay on this and let's go to Michael Cohen, who you know and you've spoken about here. Why are we hearing so much about Michael Cohen potentially cooperating?
I think Michael is 100% communicating through the press. I think he's probably even, if I had to guess, this part I don't know, and I wouldn't know because reporters are professional. He's even talking to reporters on background with them, you know, and it's something that's done in this world where they take somebody's words.
You read this as not people around Cohen. You read this as Cohen leaks.
There's been a lot out there. First of all, there was no coincidence to me that George Stephanopoulos, who Michael's very close with, and that used to be in Trump world, our relationships with reporters were something we like to control. And it was a commodity with us, with Donald Trump directly, and he was very close to George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos interviews Donald Trump in Singapore at the summit. Suddenly, a day later, I believe, or 2 days later, Michael Cohen, George Stephanopoulos has a breaking news report that Michael Cohen may be flipping and he's not sticking with his attorney. Subsequently, the New York Times, Maggie Haberman, she's big in Trump world. She has a quote from the Trump organization saying, "We had an agreement. We don't want to hear anything about these legal fees." I think Michael's view is, from what let's say we think, Trump people, Michael's view is, I'll go to the distance. Let's see how this case goes. I know I'm getting indicted, but you better pay my legal fees.
Howard Dean, what do you think of Sam's analysis there, which is based on primary source knowledge, that we're hearing about Cohen potentially cooperating in very strategic ways, and Stephanopoulos, while he's near the president, Haberman, who's a beat reporter for the Times with a lot of Trump sources, because this is Cohen's last attempt?
Look, I'm not familiar with the intricacies of Trump world, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is a signal. They can't communicate directly. This is a signal from Cohen that Trump's got to pardon him or else.
On that, I was just speaking to Trump lawyer Jay Goldberg about that, and this is where it gets a little tricky, Joyce, because even if you wanted to pardon someone, if they have enough liability for other state crimes and there's someone cooperating in upstate New York, then it could backfire. So for Joyce, take a listen to, and again, this is a Trump lawyer, this is not a Trump critic, speaking to me exclusively. Take a listen.
If he pardons Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen thereafter gets indicted by the state for misconduct, Trump's pardon of Cohen for federal offenses will be looked upon as a grave error.
Joyce?
It's not just a grave error. It doesn't give the president the sort of legal protection that presumably he's seeking as he and his folks like Giuliani dangle these federal pardons. Yesterday, we saw the New York State AG file a civil case, but that civil case contains a lot of interesting information about potential criminal prosecutions. And although the state AG has made a referral to federal agencies and presumably those prosecutions could be, I'll just say, cured with a pardon from the president, there are also pending state criminal charges. And those are something that the president can't pardon his way out of. So yesterday we saw Corey Lewandowski's name raised, Paul Manafort's predecessor on the campaign, potentially the president's children. And as much as they could be federal prosecutions, there could also be state criminal cases, and there's nothing that the president can do to end those.
Right, so you have the walls closing in and the idea that there's stuff that's completely out of this president's control, and we know how he responds to that. Then you have, Sam, a lot of the efforts to have what seem to be secret contacts. What do you think about the idea that Cohen's got materials that might be pertinent to Donald Trump that he shredded at the last minute that have been reconstructed? And have you ever gotten encrypted messages from him or others in Trump land?
I've never gotten encrypted messages from Steve Bannon or Roger Stone in my entire life.
What about from Michael Cohen?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I can follow up with you on that. I don't believe so. But look, I'll tell you who definitely would know. The Mueller special counsel, because they have everything.
You got the impression they would always know that kind of
stuff.
stuff.
I knew that they had it. First of all, it doesn't take a genius to realize that that the federal government there's nothing encrypted in this world anymore. Anyway, so I would tell you that a question that they...
Are you saying then, on the record, that means that Paul Manafort is not a genius?
He should not have done what he did. I think that was a very big misstep. I think it gave them the excuse to send him to jail.
So, Nelson, I got a question for you. If you're Michael Cohen and you're in this situation, in the middle of a probe, and you start shredding documents, do you think those would be random documents, blank pieces of paper, that kind of thing, or do you think they might be incriminating?
Well, let's remember that he did not know that this raid was coming. Right, this raid was a complete surprise to him. That's the way these raids are conducted. You don't give somebody time to shred documents. So whatever was sitting in his shredder that morning was whatever was sitting in his shredder that morning. It could be terribly incriminating. It could be.
I would draw your attention, though, to other circumstantial information. For example, in the filing that the feds made in the attorney-client privilege debate, justifying the raid, they said that they had reason to believe that he was beginning to try to destroy evidence of a secretive nature, and that was part of why they moved.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly why they moved against Paul Manafort the way they did. The feds have been hitting hard in these cases, and certainly anything they're going to find that has been shredded or encrypted, they're going to move on quickly to try to make sure that they can find out what's in there and see what they have. And what we are now reaching the stage within 10 days, these documents will be could be turned over to Mueller's team, and we'll know what he can do with them then.
Exactly, and that's a lot on a big night, on a potential inflection point night. My thanks to the entire panel. Appreciate it. Coming up, how Manafort did allegedly use other secretive tactics that have actually been associated with drug cartels and even terrorists to try to, yes, keep communication secret. Didn't work. Also, an important story we're staying on, the human toll of the child migrant crisis. We have an interview with a lawyer fighting for a mom whose baby was taken for her while she was breastfeeding, and Trump's new claim about why he says he's separating kids from their parents.
Mr. President, is it humane to separate children from their families?
That's the Democrats doing that. The Democrats forced that law upon our nation.
That is a lie. We know it's a lie, and I have the proof tonight and why it matters. All that, plus Donald Trump saying he wants to be more like guess who? Kim Jong-un. And then if you've had a busy week, there still will be time for Fallback Friday later tonight. I'm Ari Melber. You're watching The Beat on MSNBC. Truly significant breaking news. Donald Trump's former campaign chair is in jail tonight. And there is a new eye-opening accusation that Paul Manafort was allegedly communicating with associates using a tactic that's been literally deployed by Al-Qaeda. The idea is that you write draft emails that you never send, and so then you can basically share that with others to access the information, and it's never an actual piece of email. This, of course, is on top of other big questions about ties to Russia.
Are there any ties between Mr. Trump, you or your campaign, and Putin and his regime?
No, there are not. It's absurd.
Joining me now, someone who's known Paul Manafort for decades, MSNBC news analyst and reporter Howard Fineman, and Sam Nunberg back with me. The significance of this news tonight, Howard, and given your knowledge of Mr. Manafort, who is known for many things, recklessness, sure, I think that's been demonstrated, but also a type of toughness, his allies say. How do you think that'll be tested as he spends his first night in jail tonight?
Oh, I think it's going to be a long, dark night of the soul for Paul Manafort. He's been pretty lucky in a fairly dangerous legal life that he's led. He chose to go early from American politics into the international realm. He's done business around the world with some very tough characters, with the Marcoses in the Philippines, with Saudi princes and potentates, with Ukrainian wannabe dictators, with a lot of tough sort of Star Wars bar type people all around the world. But he's never really had to face up to this type of consequence. And the fact that you're in a cold, hard jail cell. This is a guy who once told me how wonderful it is to travel along the coast of Lake Como and stop at all the great palaces and wineries and so forth.
Sounds nice.
He developed very, very nice, very refined tastes. He had horses out on Long Island. His wife is a show jumper.
Look, Howard, I've never been to Lake Como, but my understanding is not everyone who goes there is accused of laundering $30 million.
No, but that may have something to do with why he was able to enjoy Lake Como, okay?
Indeed, indeed.
And it's a lot different from where he is right now. And where he's going to be, the fact is that he's got 2 trials coming up, and he's going to have to be in that jail cell from now through at least September. And I think even as the federal trial in Washington begins in September, he could still be required to stay in jail after that,
Absolutely.
which is terribly wearing mentally and physically.
One Lake Como question they never ask you in jail is red or white.
Anyway, so yeah, I think it's going to be tough, but I think I think though that he's got some mental toughness there. It's so ironic. Ari, because I think he'd had this whole career where he'd dip into these conventions and run the conventions, and they'll go back out and make a lot of money around the world. If he'd left after Ukraine and taken the chips off the table and disappeared, nobody would have heard about him.
You're absolutely right.
He wanted to come back for this one thing, because the fact is, having known Manafort, I know at the very beginning, he wanted to be a contender. You know, he wanted to be chief of staff. His original role model was Jim Baker, chief of staff to Gerald Ford.
A true power breaker. Let me show one thing as we think about all the tentacles, which is Donald Trump out there saying today, oh, well, this is just some guy, and I don't really know him, even though he was the #1 guy in my campaign at one point. Sam, who not only worked for Donald Trump, but told us earlier in the hour he used to write tweets for Donald Trump. This is a person who's also close to your former so-called mentor, Sam, because Manafort and Stone were literally running that international and controversial lobbying firm that Howard just mentioned, Stone calling it the S, in a word I won't repeat, but take a look.
Paul Manafort came in one day and said, you know, we ought to start a lobbying firm.
Lobbying had been considered kind of a sleazy business, but Roger Stone unabashedly came out and said, I'm going to make a pile of money off of this, and no apologies.
Black Manafort and Stone was the shit. It was the biggest, most powerful lobbying operation in Washington.
Certainly was. Howard would know this better than me, but it's legendary among all people that want to work in Republican politics.
And how does Stone figure in all this, watching his former partner tonight go to jail?
Well, Roger and Manafort have not worked together in a very, very long time. It's my understanding that that firm was bought, and that they sold it, Baker, Manafort, and Stone sold it, and then they parted their ways, but they kept in contact with each other and were friends. I think part of the reason also, by the way, what Howard was talking about, in terms of the reason why Paul wanted to work on the Trump campaign, was that Paul was supposed to run the convention in 2008 for the McCain campaign, and his longtime partner, Rick Davis, eventually dropped Paul because of some other clients, or it could have been the same clients that he was working for.
Right. What's interesting is you're mentioning all the people, Davis, who had interned briefly at that same firm.
Right.
There are a lot of people who work together very closely who also all are circling Donald Trump. And I think what Mueller is peeling back on is, are these all coincidences and the things they did were isolated crimes, or was there a wider conspiracy? Was there a kind of an election racketeering operation? And we don't know that yet. But again, as Manafort sleeps in jail tonight, the question is whether that changes his thinking about what he wants to say. I got to fit in. You don't think so? I got to fit in a break. Sam Nunberg and Howard Fineman, thank you both so much. There is proof that Donald Trump is lying about this migrant child policy and its devastating toll, including new reports of the feds ripping a baby from a breastfeeding mother. I'm going to speak live to an immigrant rights lawyer about this and give you my fact check on Donald Trump when we're back in 60 seconds. The other top story tonight, a humanitarian crisis caused by Donald Trump using what many call child abuse as a tool of government policy. What's new tonight? The estimates that it's now nearly 2,000 migrant children ripped from their parents under these new orders from the Trump administration. Now, this is a serious issue. Children's lives do literally hang in the balance. Donald Trump caused this crisis. He originally took credit for it, but now what's changing here, where the humanitarian crisis meets, if you want to call it, the politics, is that the heat is so high, Donald Trump is running from what he did. And tonight I can report Donald Trump is lying about his policy, which raises the question, Mr. President, if you are so ashamed now of your policy, if it is heartless, why not halt it instead of lying about it? A factual warning, what I'm about to show you is not true.
People say, look, you rip these families apart, even though it is the law, it's heartless.
But that's the law, and that's what the Democrats gave us. The Democrats forced that law upon our nation. I hate it. I hate to see separation of parents and children.
That's false. And we know it is a lie because Donald Trump and his Attorney General explicitly created this policy orphaning children. This is important, so let's get into it. I'm going to show you the proof tonight. This is the Trump administration memo from this April, signed by Jeff Sessions. This is the proof. And what this does, the reason this is happening tonight and this weekend and every day that this policy continues, is that the Trump administration shifted from a long-standing set of policies that prioritized enforcement against immigrants deemed more dangerous and offered more protection for folks who are not considered dangerous, as well as for children and families. Now, this new Trump policy orders a, quote, zero tolerance policy for all offenses and states emphatically the zero tolerance policy supersedes those other existing policies I mentioned, meaning the more family-oriented policies of past administrations, in both parties, by the way, are now out. These are the facts. Now, politicians may deny their own role in creating problems, but we have an obligation here to report the facts. And when the evidence shows that politicians are lying, which is a higher bar, we'll report that too. This is a Trump policy. These are legally segregated camps for children orphaned by this Trump policy. It's not a congressional law that requires it, and these are not cities, these are not tent communities, or any other Trump-Wellian branded spin. Now, what's the impact? Take one case. We're going to play for you a little bit of new audio. This is from inside an immigration courtroom, where a mother, and if you want to think like a human being, imagine this is a mother you know. If you want, imagine this is your mother. Because it's any mother, because this is any situation that someone could end up in. And listen as a mother tries to find out when she'll see her son again.
Well, I was told when I was separated from my son that you were going to tell me when I was going to be joined with my son again.
I don't know who told you that, but you were told incorrectly. I have no information regarding your child.
That's what's going on. That's one case, one mother, one child. That's the reality. Now, what about how it looks under this administration? Well, in another Trump-Wellian tactic, Trump's aides have been focused more on changing the images of this crisis than the policy on the ground that I was just telling you about. So the family separation is continuing while Trump aides push this tightly controlled imagery. On the left, you can see the video from the administration that tries to depict a safe environment. On the right, we have the reported facts for you investigators. In only Texas, for example, have already found healthcare problems, mistreatment of children, a lack of supervision, and a widespread inattention to the government-inflicted trauma on children and parents alike. I'm joined now by Texas State Senator Jose Rodriguez. A site in his district will be one of the first places they set up these camps. I'm also joined by Victoria DeFrancesco, a professor at the University of Texas, and Natalie Cornelio, an attorney for the Texas Civil Rights Project. She has spent time with a mother whose baby was allegedly taken from her during breastfeeding, one of the stories that's gotten so much attention. Can you tell us about that, Natalia?
Hi, good afternoon. I can tell you that that mother's story is one of many that we received in speaking to parents that were separated from their kids, that expressed on behalf of the parent a trauma that was experienced by both the parent and the child. It's one of many. That's what I can tell you about that story.
Let me play Jeff Sessions saying that they're basically being criticized unfairly, talking about the mean-spirited accusations. Take a listen.
There are politicians and activists who think having any border at all, it seems, any limit whatsoever, any enforcement activity that's taken is mean-spirited, unkind, even bigoted.
Victoria, your response?
So it's about following the law. And if we are following the law, then we should not be jailing asylum seekers. And we're getting reports that among those people who are getting sent to federal prisons, especially the adults who are separated out from their children, are folks who are coming to this country, turning themselves in and saying, I am here for asylum. So that in of itself is breaking the law. And I think a point of clarification here is the difference between an economic refugee, an economic immigrant and a humanitarian immigrant. The economic immigrant is the one who's coming here because the U.S. keeps the demand up for them, and the humanitarian immigrant is the one fleeing that strife that we hear about in Central America. And that immigrant in particular should be offered the letter of the law in terms of those protections. The immigrant, the adult, and their child, but we're seeing none of that.
Senator Rodriguez, I want to play a little more from inside that courtroom again as we try to get what we can. A lot of this has been deliberately prevented from access by the public, by the press, by the members of Congress who would appear to have some standing, and we've been reporting on that. But this is new sound of a judge basically telling this mother why, under the Trump administration policies, she can't even hear about where her child is, let alone be reunited. Take a listen.
Immigration doesn't call the court or me personally and tell me what happened to your child. If they did do that, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. I'd be happy to relay the information to you if I could, but they don't do that. So hopefully somebody will get in touch with you through that side of the government.
Hopefully someone will get in touch with you. Walk us through your view of this for any parent watching at home, imagining being told that about what amounts to a missing child.
Well, Ari, what I can tell you is that there has been plenty of testimony by pediatricians, by psychiatrists, and other healthcare providers about the tremendous harm that is being caused on these children when they are in detention centers with their parents, like they have some here in Texas. Can you imagine now what it's like for them if they're not there with their parents, as is happening now under this zero tolerance policy? The harm we're talking about is stunted growth, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health conditions that linger the trauma for years and years into their lives. So yes, the problems that this causes are tremendous, both for the children and the parents. This policy is misguided, as Victoria has pointed out. It's cruel. And I think that as Americans, we should not tolerate this. This is a country where we value freedom, where we value civil rights, where we value the human beings. And yet we are now taking a lead in the world of acting as many other cases across the world, in the Middle East, in North Africa, and other places where you have refugees all in encampments, in tent cities, and living in miserable conditions. So regardless of what Trump says, it's obvious that he's disregarding not only federal law, as was pointed out by Victoria, for asylum seekers, but also international law. And the spokesperson for the United Nations has already indicated that this is just not a normal way of treating
Natalia,
children.
you're nodding. Go ahead.
I am nodding. This is absolutely a violation of international human rights law. And actually, the way that the Texas Civil Rights Project got involved in this was filing a petition on behalf of 5 persons that were separated, 5 parents that were separated from their kids, asking the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights to order that they be reunited, exactly in the way that Senator Rodriguez just described. This is absolutely a violation of human rights laws, not just a violation of the rights of the parents, but of these children.
And Victoria, briefly, do you think when people see what's really going on, they will see the sickness that's being perpetrated in the name of the U.S. government?
Yes, and that's why we have to keep pushing to get more access into these facilities, because when it's blinded by the doors keeping the media out, keeping nonprofit organizations that want to seek to help out these children, we don't have that knowledge to push for these changes. In the last couple of days, we've seen more coverage of this, and this is helping in the effort to stop this horrendous, heart-wrenching process.
Senator Rodriguez, Professor DeFrancesco, and Natalia Cornelio, thanks to each of you. We will stay on the story. Up ahead, Donald Trump talking about what he wishes he had in common with North Korea's dictator. What? But up next, if it's Friday and after a week like this, you bet it's time to fall back together. It's Friday on the Beat. You can hear the laughter already. You know what that means. It is time to fall back.
Oh.
And right back on Fallback Friday, you've seen him before, radio legend duo Bobbito Garcia and Stretch Armstrong. You remember Stretch on Bobbito, the show in the 90s that launched stars like Jay-Z, Nas, and Eminem. Bobbito has a new documentary, Rock Rubber 45s, coming out this month. And joining this ridiculous duo, Adam Met from the group AJR. They've got a song on the #1 alternative section of Billboard, another song that was made the official anthem for March for Our Lives. Congratulations on that. And I should mention, you have a master's in constitutional religious law.
I do.
So you are bringing the music and the law.
Yes. Yep.
So I bring the law and I pretend to bring the music. So you are doing what some of us pretend to do. This is, as always, a new thing, a new mix. I'm really glad to have you guys, and all of you are doing interesting things. But Bobbito, who needs to fall back?
Wow. Well, you know, I came with 15 ideas today, and I had to like whittle it down to 2. The first one is aioli sauce.
Okay. Okay, taking on the big issues.
What is an aioli, first of all?
I don't know.
I grew up very humble, as you'll find out in my documentary, Rock Rubber 45s. You know, I only knew like one lettuce growing up, iceberg. I didn't even know it was called iceberg.
Iceberg ice grill.
Get older, there's like kale, spinach. All right, cool, options, I'm happy. I'm not a fan of condiments. I don't like mayo on my sandwiches. I don't like mustard on my sandwiches. I go to all these restaurants. No, time out.
Let me ask you a question.
Because I know you like aioli.
No, I just got
he likes aioli.
I got a question for you. Are you secretly 85?
No.
That's what you sound like. You sound like the 85-year-old in a Brooklyn diner who's like,
Jewish.
What is aioli sauce?
85 and Jewish.
But why did
And Jewish.
Look, I go to a restaurant. I just want options. Can you put the aioli sauce on the side? Why is it already embedded in my sandwich? I go to these nice spots.
Do you think it's a conspiracy?
No, I just, it's cats like him and cats like you that like really like aioli sauce. I never heard of it up until 5 years ago.
Can I say something? And I've never had to say this on the show before.
What?
You don't know me like that. You're trying to say that I'm like artisanal? You don't know me like that. I'm a Snickers guy. I keep it real simple. Who needs to fall back, Stretch?
Wow, I think our former mayor, Rudy Giuliani, needs to fall back. Or can I amend that to a crawl back? Yeah, I mean, his reemergence on the national stage is really irksome, particularly for us native New Yorkers who remember what a disgraceful mayor he was. Mm-hmm. And I actually brought something from the 90s when he was harassing street vendors and street artists and
show and tell
and guys trying to sell books. Remember that we saw.
What is this? We got it.
This is a painting by Rob Lederman, and that's been on my wall since the 90s, okay. and it's as relevant as ever today as it ever was in the past.
This is a special. I've never gotten up either. you keep telling us. So this is back when he was very controversial. Just as a mayor.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, his authoritarian
regime.
Tendencies were starting to come out, and
you're seeing that in his defense of the president as well. You feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's like post-traumatic stress for New Yorkers.
For New Yorkers,
to deal with this dude back in the day.
Adam, who needs to fall back?
Hashtags. Hashtags need to fall back. They are extremely important for organizing and mobilizing movements like March for Our Lives, but there are so many problems with it. Are you guys familiar with like Love and Hip Hop, the TV show?
I know Ari's up on it.
Honestly, I've never seen the show, but if you go on Twitter, it's always the #1 trending thing.
Right.
And if you see that there are like 200,000 retweets about love and hip hop, that makes you kind of think like that's the thing you should be looking at.
Right.
There's so many more important things to be looking at, like our president separating children from their families at the border, or saying that we need to stand in line and listen to him when he's on TV.
I got to tell you, I think that was hashtag a great point.
Thank you.
Hashtag aioli.
Hashtag so quiet after the jokes. All right. I have something to bring up, which is when we had Stretch come on the show and we were booking him, he was like, I won't go on without Bobbito. And we got you on together. I think we can show some of that. The two of you guys came on with Vic Mensa, Bill Christ. Then here, you came on alone. This is you. We said, you want to come on? Stretch can't make it. And you were like, I'm fine with that. I'm ready to go. And so I'm wondering, this is a one-way relationship, and I think we have some footage. I want you to watch this, Bobbito. We have some footage of how Bobbito's been treating you.
Wow.
Is this a news show? Is this a real TV show?
Way more fun.
My real fallback is Scott Pruitt, LotionGate. He needs to stop being an ethical disaster and also sending security guards to buy lotion. That's my fallback. What were you going to say, Stretch?
I was going to go back to the first time I was on the show where you threw me under the bus. My look in the 90s was your fallback, and I was.
And we said you look great now, though.
Yeah, but I was coming for you tonight, and your producers told me I couldn't because people have been going at you too hard.
Well, only because we don't want to be a thing where I'm always getting told to fall back. I was told to fall back for homework last Friday.
I'm just saying you were protected.
We're gonna fit in a break. Thank you, incredible panel. We'll be right back with more. Donald Trump's bromance with the dictator of North Korea is getting even more intense. Look at what he said on Fox.
He's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Some of those people pay attention because of all the murders in North Korea. Now, when pressed on this, Trump says he's joking.
What did you mean just now when you said you wished Americans would sit up at attention when you spoke?
I'm kidding. You don't understand sarcasm. Who are you with? Wait. Who are you with? No. Who are you with? You're with CNN?
Wait,
you are the worst.
Who you with? Trump wants to know. Kidding? Was he also kidding or being sarcastic when he literally saluted the dictator? You cannot make it up.
Hey, it's Chris Hayes from MSNBC. You know, every day I come to the office and we make a television show, and every day I think to myself, there's so much more I want to talk about. And so this is our podcast. It's called Why Is This Happening? And the whole idea behind it is to get to the root of the things that we see play out every day. They're driven by big ideas. Each week, I sit down with a person uniquely suited to explain why this is happening.
New episodes of Why Is This Happening? Every Tuesday. Listen for free wherever you get your podcasts.